Welcome to Electric Bike Report. My name's John.
And I'm Griffin.
This week we're going to be talking about some upcoming e-bike releases from Liv and Super73.
That's right. Bring on the bikes.
We're also going to give you an update on how you can still access bike-friendly BLM lands during the government shutdown.
Just because the government shut down doesn't mean your bike riding should.
That's right. And we'll also get into some questions and comments from the audience, including having a discussion about mid-drives versus hub motors when it comes to hill climbing.
All that and more on this episode of the Weekly Recharge.
All right, jumping into this week's news, our first story is about the folding e-bike company Blaupunkt. They're aiming to begin a US-based assembly of e-bikes next year in 2026. So they are currently assembling their e-bikes in Paraguay, but they're planning to relocate to a factory near Asheville, North Carolina. And that's going to basically put them, amongst the growing ranks of companies that are assembling or planning to assemble e-bikes here in the US. So that includes companies like Electric Bike Company, Santa Cruz, Pivot, and eBliss that we talked about previously on the show. So the frames, the magnesium frames, are still going to be cast in China or Malaysia, but we would also expect that the other components are still going to be made overseas, but then, the bikes will be put together here. Frames initially will not be finished or painted here, but that capacity is intended to be added later on. And then the company, their current base in Paraguay, that was sort of like an intentional step along the way to get them here to the US. So they're just kind of like following through on that goal. We have a quote from the CEO, whose name is Brian Tedesco. He's basically calling Blaupunkt the first major brand to bring assembly to the US. And he said that, quote, "It is a risk to go first, but we believe in the American worker and we plan to hire 60 to 80 production line employees over time. The new facility will be designed to produce up to 250,000 UL 2849 certified Blaupunkt foldable e-bikes per year." And he also explained that the new facility will continue to use the same advanced technology and manufacturing processes, as well as sticking to the same safety and quality standards that have been set up in Paraguay. So that's a pretty interesting development. Definitely like to see more companies coming here, especially, if that can help to lower some costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And, potentially this could be like the first step. If we're doing assembly here, maybe that does lead to manufacturing somewhere down the line, better infrastructure and support, maybe more demand for it. So like he kind of said, it's a first step, and we'll just kind of see if more follow suit and how things play out for Blaupunkt.
For sure.
But next up, we have Liv debuting the new Tempt E Plus and E Plus EX Plus. So Liv, for those who do not know already, deals exclusively in e-bikes for women, which is pretty cool that they operate in the niche just for women. Both of these models are e-MTBs, so let's start with the E Plus. It features the Giant Sync Drive Sport Mid-Drive, which has 75 Newton meters of torque. It has a 430 watt-hour battery with an estimated 35 to 71 miles of range. It's compatible with a 200 watt range extender as well if you want a little bit more juice. It has the A-Lux aluminum frame available in 4 different sizes.
Nice.
It also includes the Suntour XCM ATB fork with 100 millimeters of travel, making it more kind of an XC bike. Shimano MT200 hydraulic disc brakes, a 9-speed Shimano Q's drivetrain, and either a 27.5 or 29-inch wheel setup, depending on the size that you choose. Now, the E Plus EX includes these features plus an MIK cargo rack. So if you are looking for something a little bit more hybrid, some commuting and some trails on the weekend type of situation, you can get a little bit more utility that way. But both bikes also feature Apple Find My Tech and Liv's e-lock system, which means you can remotely lock via an app. So, with that, it looks like a very promising bike. I do like Liv's brand overall because I know, like, when we were shopping for my wife recently for a bike for her, she commented how most bikes seem to be catered to dudes.
Yep.
And
Very
if they
true.
do cater to women, they almost do it like to a sickening degree and make it like too girly. She's like, I just want something that's a little bit more for me, but not to the extremes like
Bright
that.
pink necessarily. Or
so Liv's a pretty cool brand, and interesting to see what they got cooking here with the Tempt E Plus.
Good to see that many different sizes as well. That's great. So then moving on, though, let's talk a little bit about the government shutdown. So I've got an article here saying that basically the BLM and National Park system are to remain mostly open during the shutdown here. So, depending on how things shake out, the government may be back up and running by the time this video airs. But, in that case, it would be sort of a retroactive thing. But assuming the government still is shut down, then, this stuff would in theory, still stand. So basically, law enforcement, including border operations and emergency response teams, are still going to be available. Most roads and tourist stops in national parks are still going to be accessible to the public, but park employees won't be there. They won't be able to update road or trail conditions. They won't be managing social media at all. And then in terms of BLM stuff, most of the non-essential activities have stopped, but public lands and facilities that can be kept open to the public will be. And then some other operations will continue at locations where there are fees collected. And so here in Utah, we were looking at the 15th Outer Bike in Moab, and that event is this weekend. And so the state of Utah is actually continuing to fund that event and other parks as well. So there's at least, some stuff you can get to out there, and you don't have to sweat it so much.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear they're not shutting down. Now that it's October, it's fall season. In my mind, this is kind of when, the tourists start to die down and the locals can enjoy the national parks near them a little bit more.
Truth.
So for those that have some bikeable areas, it's nice to know you can go check those out. Don't have to worry about it being shut down. So moving on, though, we have the defunct e-bike brand Fuell auctions its assets. So this is actually a follow-up on a story that we covered almost a year ago, John, when we first reported on their closing down. So for those who don't know the backstory, Fuell launched in 2023 with a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo with a dual battery commuter and an advertised range of 225 miles. Pretty big claims there. Yeah. It earned over $1 million in funding, so obviously a lot of interest. Now, the company entered Chapter 7 bankruptcy last October, owing around $7 million to creditors. The company's physical and intellectual property was auctioned off to pay earnings towards its debt, including the auction house, landlords, trustee for insurance, and the bank. Ultimately, the company's trademark, patents, and website sold for around $50,000. Some folding e-bikes sold for around $500 to $600 a pop, and non-folding models sold for around $1,100 to $1,600. There were 6 lots of furniture, office equipment, and maintenance equipment that were not sold. Now, it's unclear who purchased all of this stuff at this time or what they intend to do with it, whether they want to revive the brand or maybe try and flip some of these things to make a profit later on. But I think it's with what they owed versus what they were able to sell for, about 2.5% or so of their total debts.
Pretty minimal, yeah.
So, again, the story might not necessarily be over. We've seen a couple of brand revivals, so time will tell what kind of happens here. But kind of a sad story for what started so promising for the Fuell brand, which, of course, ties into some motorcycle stuff as well. But
it does, yeah, the founder there. But moving on to some more e-bike specific moto style e-bike stuff. We've got the new teaser from Super73. So they made a post on Instagram that shows a very shadowy image of a bike. Just you kind of get the outline of it there. And there's an interesting caption here that says, "For years, you've been waiting for innovation from the brand that started a movement in two-wheel transportation. We've heard you, and we're proud to be showcasing our next big thing, figuratively speaking, at Moto Beach Classic on October 11th. Be the first to experience an entirely new generation of electric mobility." So the story that we're looking at here comes to us from Lectric. And Micah over there, always good reporting, pointed out that there's some questions here. Looking at the image, there's the brand's typical moto styling. You've got chunky tires, you've got a nice long saddle, large headlight, a dual crown fork, and then a set of BMX style riser bars. And then, of course, it also has pedals and a chain drive. But Micah pointed out that there are no visible suspension elements, so it might be a lighter weight or more simplified model that kind of focuses on affordability. And then he also compared the bike to the Super73Z Miami model, suggesting that this new bike could be larger if they do share the same 20-inch wheel size. But I would actually kind of bank on this being something more like a kid's bike. I think just the proportions look a little bit different. We've heard stories coming from California about a lot of schools cracking down. So I'm thinking maybe this is like an attempt to gear a legal bike toward high school students, getting them to class a little bit easier, something like that.
I could absolutely see something like that. I did talk to Super73 a little bit about this over the summer back at a trade show where I came across them. They were pretty tight-lipped on details. Just kind of hinted something was coming down the pipe that wouldn't be too far removed from what they're known for, but would be a little bit different. So this is probably what it was. with some of these vague teasers we stumble across on Instagram, sometimes they can be super misleading, but I'm kind of in that same camp with you, just based on the evidence we have. It does look almost kind of like a kid's bike, but again, time will tell when the full reveal happens later on. But
yeah, the couple things that stood out to me about their caption there, they said the next big thing with figuratively speaking, so that suggests to me that it's a little bit smaller, and it also said new generation in there, so that to me, maybe kids, maybe somebody on the younger side. Anyway, we will see as things unfold, especially when their announcement happens later in October. But in any case, that does it for this week's news.
All right, so next up, we're going to be previewing some gear that we were sent from Litelok that we're going to be doing some full reviews on. But for right now, just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of tease and preview into what we've got. So John, why don't you explain a little bit about these two locks that we were sent?
For sure. So these are products, again, from Litelok. We have two different models here. These are the X1 and the larger X3 models. They are good for both bikes and motorcycles. And the cool thing about these is that they are advertised to be angle grinder resistant. They use this proprietary material called baronium, which is a fused composite. And then they have also a rubberized coating to prevent frame damage when you have it actually around your bike. Now, these are made in Britain, and they're also tested and approved by Sold Secure, which is a very highly regarded UK-based security testing company.
One of the standards for sure when it comes to bike locks.
Absolutely. So the X1 here, there's a good description from the web page here. It says it resists angle grinder attack by turning the grinder's energy and force in on itself. It offers at least 5 times more resistance than the best-selling U-locks without adding any extra weight. It is permanently fused to a hardened, fine-grain, high-tensile steel core, which provides protection against all other commonly used tools, such as bolt croppers, cable cutters, long bars, and hammers and chisels. So there's also a reflective strip on this one for better nighttime visibility. And then on this end where the keyhole is, so there's like a self-sealing silicone cover that just prevents dirt from getting inside there.
Nice.
It weighs 3.7 pounds and it is roughly 5.5 inches by 10.5 inches. And that one retails for $189.
Nice.
There's also these tactical mounts that are made of fiberglass and rubber. So these just strap to your frame and then you secure these inside there. I have one assembled here with the X3. So the X3, which again is larger and heavier and also suitable for bike and motorcycle use. This one claims to be at least 20 times more resistant than the best-selling D-locks without adding any extra weight. And this one has a higher-end lock. It's from the Abloy Sentry lock, and this is another quote here, the most pick-proof locking mechanism available. It's 4.6 pounds. That one is about 5.5 inches by 11 inches, and that one retails for right around $300. So the mounts are available separately. Each of those is about $30. So we will leave links down in the video description if you want to check those out. But as Griffin said, you can stay tuned for our full reviews later on.
All right, let's take a look at what we were able to get into the shop this week. We just had one bike so far, but hey, it's Thursday. You never know. We might get like 5 more deliveries by the time we're done filming.
We did have one UPS truck stop by, but no bikes.
There's still FedEx out there somewhere. You and I both know it. So we did get the Airtopia Carbon 1 Pro in. We are working our way through the Airtopia lineup. Been very impressed with some of the other models we've checked out from them. For those who do not know, the brand specializes in making affordable carbon fiber models. This one this one comes with a 750 watt peak motor, also 60 Newton meters of torque on that one. The frame on this is really unique design, almost kind of looks like a lightning bolt with that top tube like section going on there.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah, very interesting looking on that. And of course, just ultra lightweight, under 40 pounds. So gotten in a few quick rides on it and impressed with the early returns, but of course we'll get that through all of our testing and get the review done ASAP. But we did have some reviews go live, or at least one review and a comparison. So John, talk us through the Triker.
That's right. Yeah, the Lectric Triker. So, most of the electric trikes that we've reviewed so far have been fairly entry level, where Lectric kind of aimed a little bit higher with this one. It's kind of mid tier. Now this one has a 750 watt motor. It has the sensor swap technology that allows you to choose between torque and cadence sensing modes. And it's also one of the most comfortable trikes that we've tested. Many of them just feel kind of cramped, whereas this one just gives you a roomier cockpit and just a little bit more of a relaxed feel overall. So it's also very customizable in terms of fit, has a nice 180 degree yeah, adjustable stem. Pretty cool all around, so be sure to check that one out if it interests you. But if you're more into the mountain bike side of things,
well, then we've got something for you, because Justin and Bryce sat down and put head-to-head two of the most talked about e-MTBs of this year, talking about the Specialized Turbo Levo and the Amflow as well. Both of those bikes are just so much fun. It was really kind of cool to sit down and go head-to-head with them. Both of them have ushered in new eras of motor power. Both are over 100 newton meters of torque, more than 700 watts apiece. The Amflow goes all the way up to like 1,000 watts, I believe. Just tons of power. Of course, the Specialized has that really awesome suspension system with the Fox Genie system that is proprietary to them. Removable batteries, some cool internal storage stuff going on there. But again, the Amflow is kind of breaking our brains a little bit. It is just ultra lightweight, like I think 7 pounds less than the S-Works model that we compared it to there, but has just as much, if not more, like power and like battery range. So these are two phenomenal e-MTBs, definitely top tier stuff. We're talking like $10,000 and $15,000 ish respectively. So Justin and Bryce did a really good breakdown on that. If you are curious just to even see them, even if you're not looking to shop, it is a comparison worth jumping into.
And then, as always, make sure you're subscribed so you can stay up to date on all of our new releases.
All right, I don't know if you have vacation plans to go to Pennsylvania anytime soon, but if you do, John has you covered with a little bike tour that you can take. Got a pretty cool place to check out. John, what do you got for us?
For sure, yeah. So this is a pretty interesting thing that I just kind of happened to stumble on. I started going through Trail Link, which, again, shout out to them, but just kind of started looking at the map and zooming in on places, and I thought, we haven't really been to Pennsylvania in a while. There's this huge trail that caught my attention. It is called the Pine Creek Rail Trail, and it actually runs for 62 miles through the Pine Creek Gorge in Pennsylvania, which is called the Grand Canyon of Pennsylvania. And this route was actually voted by USA Today among the 10 great places to take a bike tour. So historically, it was a rail line. It started in 1883 as the Jersey Shore, Pine Creek, and Buffalo Railway. That was later shortened to just the Pine Creek Railway. Sorry, that's a tongue twister there. And that train served lumber companies in the area. The last train ran through in 1988. The trail itself was started in 1996, and then it completed its full length to where it is now back in 2012. So right now the path is made of crushed gravel, and it's pretty gentle. It's got a 2% grade across the whole 62-mile length. It starts and ends in Wellsboro Junction and Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania, and it's open to mostly bikers and hikers. There's also a section where there's like a service road that runs next to the trail from Ansonia to the Tyadagton campground, if I'm saying that right.
You did better than I could have done.
Thanks. I'm glad. That was a tough one, but that service road is open to equestrians, so you might see some horses while you're out there, or if you have one yourself, you could always bring your horse there. But yeah, the trail as it goes through mostly runs alongside the actual Pine Creek. And then the gorge that you ride through is between 800 and 1,400 feet deep, and it is about a mile wide. So with that, you get really great views of forested mountains. There's dramatic rock outcroppings, there's bridges, and then of course you get the flowing water of the creek itself. But there's a lot of wildlife here. So if you're interested in bird watching or that sort of thing, that's definitely a thing. There's deer, there's black bear, you get bald eagles, elk, wild turkeys, and maybe even some river otters. And then, of course, on the plant side of things, you've got wildflowers in the spring. There's a lot of old growth forest, and then there are also pine and spruce plantations. But biking isn't just the only thing you can do here. There's a lot of stuff that you get access to along the route. There's whitewater rafting, kayaking, and canoeing. Fishing is also a big thing. The article mentioned trout specifically. There's swimming areas, there's camping areas, which really help to make it possible to do this over multiple days. There's cross-country skiing in the winter. There's even some horse-drawn covered wagon rides in some areas.
Nice.
This trail connects to other trails in the area. There's state parks that you can get to. There's some waterfalls around. And then, of course, along the way, there's also some towns with shopping and dining. So seems like a really nice way to spend a few days. Now, e-bikes are allowed, and as usual, there's no throttle use, so just pedaling, and I would bank on Class 1s. I didn't find info specifically about Class 1s or Class 3s, but I would say stick to that 20 mile per hour limit.
Usually a safe bet. Yeah.
Yep. And then, if you don't have your own e-bike or you don't want to bring it with you, you can pick up bikes from rental shops along the way. So, spending some time in Pennsylvania, this is, I imagine, a wonderful time of year to be there with the leaves changing. Just try to, find something that might have some nice fall appeal.
I sure hope so, because I'm actually planning a trip to go to Pennsylvania next year, as it turns out.
Cool.
I'm a diehard Philadelphia Eagles football fan. Go Birds.
I can attest to that.
But I've never actually been to the state, so I'm actually in the midst of planning that out, hoping to catch a game next year. So this looks pretty awesome. Not too close to Philadelphia, but hopefully I can make the trip. But yeah, just some of these pictures here, like the bridges here, it looks green here, but I'd be all about the fall colors as well. All the wildlife, except maybe the black bear. I know they're supposed to be the more gentle one, right? It's black bear.
Yeah, you just stand up and roar at them.
Yeah, I just don't like messing with any kind of bear. But just overall, lots of really cool stuff to check out. So if you have checked out this trail, let us know what you thought about it down in the comments, or if you have a suggestion for us to check out next week, you can let us know in the comments as well.
All right, let's jump into our questions and answers section. This is one of our favorite segments of the show, and we hope you find it informative as well. Starting things off, we've got a question on the Best for Heavy Riders video on YouTube. This comes to us from Wayne Pavey or Pavy 888. He says, how did the Specialized cargo bike get up that hill in 1 minute with only a 700 watt motor? Does it have a massive torque figure?
It's got a pretty good torque figure, but I'm really glad that Wayne asked this question, because this is exactly why we do hill testing in the first place.
Yes, it is.
Because all the motors say 750 watts and this much torque and blah, 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 blah. But put it on a hill, that's where you're going to really find out what it's made of and what it's capable of doing. So in the case of the Specialized Globe Haul ST, it made it to the top of our old test hill location of Hellhole in 1 minute and 5 seconds on throttle, which is tied with 3 other bikes for the 4th fastest time we recorded there. And then the pedal time was 1 minute flat, placing it 2nd place, tied with 1 other bike. So again, it was such a good and strong performance from that bike. We were really impressed with it. Now, Specialized they play things a little bit close to the vest when it comes to talking about all of the details of their motor. So I don't know peak wattage, things like that. But again, this is why we do the testing in the first place. And when it comes to motors, sometimes there's secret sauce in there with the programming. Sometimes the actual construction of motors themselves is just something that can give one motor an advantage over another one.
Things like gearing ratios.
Like on the hub motors, materials, things like that. And then on like the mid-drive side of things, like there's tons of different things there. Are they using belts? Are they using cogs? Is it like the harmonic pin ring system that TQ uses? There's a lot of different things that lead and produce to different advantages in terms of power or like noise level, things like that. So in the case of Specialized here, we didn't crack that motor open. I can't tell you fully what's in the secret sauce of that one, but clearly
they usually frown at that.
They usually frown on that. We have to return those bikes, but clearly like some good stuff going on there, because that outpaced a lot of 750 watt, even some 1,000 watt hub motors. So if you are in the market looking at the Specialized Globe Haul ST, it is a terrific performer that we can vouch for on hills. Brakes as well. I think it's still an all-time brake performer, and the range was pretty great as well. So
I did want to add that on the pedal times, one of the 2 bikes that beat this had dual motors. So that's not even a fair comparison at that point.
No, it's not. Yeah. So awesome stuff. All right, but moving on to our next question here. It comes to us from Terry Dickerson 001 on the Event and Adventure 3 YouTube review, who says, I bought one of these in Destin, Florida in August and absolutely love it. I am a bigger guy and needed something that fit me, and this was it. My wife bought a Santa Monica, and we are now riding more than driving.
Awesome.
If I had to ding anything, and this may be more me than the bike, it would be handlebar height. I would prefer them to be about 1 to 1.5 inches higher, but overall, very happy with the investment in this bike. Glad to hear you're enjoying it, Terry.
Yeah, it's an awesome bike, and we wanted to include this in the show just to sort of I guess make it clear to everyone that, you can change things on your bike. You're not stuck with the way that your bike comes out of the box. In this case, if you do want to raise your handlebars, you've got a few options there. There are basically 3 options that you'd want to resort to. All have some various advantages and disadvantages. So the first thing would be replacing the stem. Now, with that, you can just get a a riser stem that has a fixed angle that would replace the standard straight stem that comes with the bike. The downside of that is that it is fixed, and if you don't like that, then you would have to swap a whole part out. Another option, though, would be an adjustable stem that allows you to change the angle of that with tools. This, is very adaptable on the fly. So if you're letting various riders switch between your bike, you can very easily set the height to their preferred setting. You don't have to make big changes at that. The downside with that is that the stem can kind of loosen up over time, especially if you're in bumpy areas. So like in the case of the Adventure, we may not recommend that just because we typically don't want to have an adjustable stem on a bike that spends a lot of time off road. But if you're generally riding on paved surfaces or paths, then you'd probably be okay to do that.
Just fine.
The final thing would actually just be swapping out the handlebars. So the Adventure's handlebars are pretty flat. So this would allow you to keep the standard stem, but you could swap out those flat handlebars for low or high-rise handlebars, which basically just sort of have like a bit of a U shape to them. And those, raise the handlebar heights to varying degrees. Similar to the first stem option that I mentioned, the static stem. If you don't like that height, then you'd have to, again, swap handlebars. But I guess more importantly there, I think the bigger downside is maybe having to move and realign all of the things on the handlebars. So your brake levers, your control panels, that sort of thing. So, it just might be a little bit of a pain. But that should give you some options to customize and tailor the fit.
And I think just overall, kind of like John said here, if you were like, there's one downside, a lot of these things you can kind of just figure out on your own. You don't have to be a crazy DIYer to really make this bike perfectly fit for you. Like even like myself with my bike, I'm actually saving up right now to get a carbon handlebar because I also want a little bit more rise on my ride. So I'm just like waiting for the right sale there. But that, like to me, that's all the Trek rails missing for me to do a little bit higher up, and just waiting to get a good deal on the handlebars there.
And with things like this, all you really need is a set of Allen wrenches. So piece of cake.
Exactly.
But let's see, moving on to a question from the Lectric Discover 2 review that is on our website. This comes to us from Ronald Willis, who says, I'm 73 years young, appreciate that, and I do a lot of camping. Looking to buy a reliable e-bike step through to get further into the bush. I'm 5'9" and mama is 5'3". Trails are gravel, grass, and paved, and I suppose some hills. 500 watt or 750 watt motor, need a good battery, and sort of lightweight in case we get lost and it's raining. Speed is not a priority, but comfort and weight is. Thanks.
So Ronald, we are here to help you out. Now, full disclosure, this one was a little bit tricky for John and I. It actually took us a little bit of deliberating back and forth, and I don't know that we got something that checks every box necessarily, but we do have a few options, and you can kind of like pick or choose what concession you're willing to make there.
Yep.
Now, where you kind of started off talking about camping, RV crowd, I kind of my brain instantly went to Lectric and the XP4, a bike that, in its origins, the XP was a huge hit with RVers, I know. So this is a very highly versatile bike with a really strong motor performance. And it is available in either 500 or 750 watt models. So you can actually kind of pick there. It has a low step frame as well. It's labeled as an ST, but really more kind of like a mid step, just lower step over height on that one. But really good, versatile bike. It has a little bit of everything. Good motor power, suspension fork on that, 3-inch wide tires, a little bit wider, a little bit of a tread pattern to them, good brakes. Now the concession on that one is it's not necessarily light. They do approach about 70 pounds on the XP4s. So if you're willing to kind of live with that, or if you need to like hop off and just like, do the push along method or something like that, it's a very good option. We actually have that at the top of our best list right now for the best overall e-bike, just for sheer value. Another good option to look at would be the Ride One Up Vorsa. So this one goes for $1,600. Oh, and sorry, jumping back to the XP4. I can't remember if I mentioned that or not. $999 for the 500 watt and $1,299 for the 750.
Correct. Yep.
750 also like throws in, I think, like a suspension.
C-post. There's more color options.
Couple of things there.
Larger battery. Yeah.
But then jumping back to the Vorsa, so that one starts at $1,600. There is an ST frame available. Again, this one's around 70 pounds, so it's not necessarily light. Kind of hard to get that sometimes with e-bikes. But it has a suspension fork, a programmable 750 watt motor, so you can actually choose between torque and cadence sensor on that. It is a hybrid kind of SUV style bike, so it comes with some tires that have a friendly tread for campgrounds, things like that. It's one of the more powerful bikes that we've test it out, and you can kind of like help control the range just by like adjusting that power to your preference. And as needed, if you go a little bit more conservative, you are going to stretch that battery life out, which is really nice. So another really good option there you can take a look at. And then we also came up with the Rad Power Bikes Rad Kick. Now the concession on this one is we'd probably have you swap out the tires, but this one is $1,400 to $1,600 depending if you get the belt drive or the
chain drive.
Chain drive. Can't remember if it's 7 or 8 speed.
I think it's 7 speed. The chain drive has a cadence sensor. The belt drive has a torque sensor as well.
Correct.
So a little bit of a difference there.
Thank you for that. Now, the appeal here is this one is lighter. It starts at about 55 pounds, so it is getting a little bit closer there. Comes with a suspension fork as well, so not sacrificing any comfort. It's got a 500-watt motor. It's got some pretty good pep to it, though, I'd say.
Yep.
And then, like I mentioned before, the tires are maybe the only drawback if you're doing a lot of off-road riding and not a lot of pavement stuff. But, that's a fairly inexpensive thing to swap out that you could look at. So those would be the 3 recommendations we have for you, where that comment came to us on the Discover 2 review, kind of assuming you're not looking to spend more than $2,000. So if any of those sound appealing and you go with one of them, let us know which one you pick. We always love kind of knowing how these stories end. So
indeed, yeah. I think personally, I probably like the Rad Kick is checking the most boxes there, just because it is on the lighter side. But I mean, both those none of these bikes are going to pedal poorly without power. So that is just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so our next one comes to us from Henry Toussaint 9385 from the Best Commuter E-Bikes on YouTube, who says, you said multiple times in the video that certain bikes don't have good hill climbing times because of their mid-drive motors. Why? On Reddit, everyone says mid-drives are better for climbing hills. So why then do they have the worst hill climbing times in practice?
That is a very good question, and that's something that's definitely not obvious if you're, newer to e-bikes, if you're researching e-bikes there. So, we've talked about, I think, the last episode of the show, how in a lot of cases, bikes with rear hub motors typically add to the effort that you put in, whereas mid-drives amplify your effort since they're connected directly to the drivetrain. So bikes with rear hub motors are typically faster when climbing hills, but that speed doesn't necessarily mean that they're better or worse. Mid-drives being connected to the drivetrain have a little bit of an advantage there. You can leverage the gearing. You can make it a little bit lighter or easier with gear changes there. And you can also get away with like less motor power. So most mid-drives out there are 250 watt nominal. And I would say that, by feel, by power, those typically feel similar to a 500 watt hub motor. And, obviously there's more powerful mid-drives that would feel comparable to more powerful rear hubs. But another benefit of mid-drives is that they are typically a little bit more efficient. We see that a lot in our range test. That is a common result. And just mid-drives with the weight balance there and with the motor connected at the bottom bracket there, they just typically feel more natural to pedal both with and without power. Hopefully you're not using powder on your e-bikes.
I would hope not.
Now, again, hub motors are often a little bit more powerful. So especially in the case of like 750 watt or 1,000 watt motors, they can make for just an easier overall experience. Another thing we hit last week is that, because they are not connected to the drivetrain, if your chain breaks, you can actually, just hit the throttle and get home that way. But that also basically allows you to shift a little bit more easily when you're going uphill. So you have a bit of an advantage there. The motor, creates slack in the chain since, you're not pushing on it. So basically the bottom line here is that it just kind of comes down to what you value. So if you want a more analog bike-like feel and a little better efficiency, we would steer you towards a mid-drive motor. If you want faster overall climbing and you don't mind that slightly less natural feel, maybe go with a rear hub. But, cost is a factor as well. So mid-drives are more expensive typically. Rear hubs are a little bit more affordable. And we've honestly seen like the performance getting closer as torque sensors with rear hub motors are getting more and more refined.
And as we've reported on over the last few weeks, like mid-drives are becoming more powerful as hub drives are becoming more natural.
Good
so
point.
They are trying to kind of like meet in the middle here. John gave a really good breakdown. The only thing I would add to that too is when you're going through things like Reddit or other forums, the context of better always matters, because to me, if you're like doing mountain biking or something like that, most mountain bikers are going to prefer a mid-drive, even if they can't match the sheer power. If you're climbing up a technical climb, you really do value the precision and the control that you get above all else. Yes, you need power to make the climb, but you don't want something that's going to blast you off or anything like that. Also, the weight displacement is another factor to consider as well. That mid-drive is right between the cranks. So you've moved something that weighs, 6 to 10 pounds when we're talking about motors to something a little bit more central on the bike, as opposed to weighing down the back end, which can affect the handling. Again, something a little more pronounced when off-road. So all this is to say, it's not something that's objectively better.
Yes.
It's just all about you, how you plan on using it, where you're using it, things like that. And, it's just a good thing that we have access to both motors, and you can kind of pick the one that will match what it is you're looking to do.
Yeah, that's why we do our reviews. So, tune in, watch our reviews, read them, and hopefully we can help steer you towards what bike, works best for you. But anyway, moving on, we actually have a few comments here on this next video. So we're going back to the Lectric XP4, specifically the 750 watt model that we reviewed on YouTube. So when that review came out, we kind of got the bikes relatively last minute. We had to push out a review before testing was actually fully complete. So in that, we did not have a range test, and boy, did you guys let us know about that. So let's see, Joseph Puchel, I believe I'm saying that. Puchel, I'm sorry. 6497 says, I'm liking it, but I need range test. Then Soshumi 6HO said, did you guys drop the ball in the range test? It's been a few months and I still don't see range test results. And then Mike Martin 9113 said, apparently it wasn't too great. And then Drake Bunch 9807 said, did you guys ever get around to doing a range test?
So those were just four of actually far more comments on that. So yes, when it comes to that, we did actually finish the range test not too long after that. We just updated the written review side of things. The unfortunate thing about YouTube is once you put things up there, I obviously can't add to the video. And then just because YouTube's YouTube, putting up a second video also has some complications in terms of how it kind of works on our channel. The one, that horse was out of the barn and already had some views. So we did update on the written side of things. So apologies if that wasn't super clear. Our intentions to steer people there to find the answers. But like I said, we did complete the range test. So just to recap for those who may have missed it, on the XP4 750 watt, we got between 36.9 and 63.4 miles on a single charge of the battery. This was a really awesome result, especially for folders, which typically have smaller batteries, especially when they're frame integrated, just smaller frames, things fold, things like that. So the class average for folding bikes, at least at the time that we updated the review with that information, it was between 27 and 47 miles on folding bikes. So clearly it went far, far further than the average folding bike does. Now, it was a little bit short of Lectric's claimed range, but again, in our book, that was just terrific range overall, especially for a 750 watt motor, which is pretty powerful. It can draw a lot of charge off the battery feeding that motor, but actually it proved to be pretty efficient. Now, considering everything the bike comes with for $1,300, including the motor, the battery, the suspension seat post, and wider selection tires, we think that it is an excellent value, kind of as we mentioned before. It's one of our top e-bike picks. So good range, good hill climbing, good brakes, good, really everything. There's a reason we talk about the XP4 a lot. So hopefully that helps, and apologies to those who were a little disappointed with missing it. But yes, we did update it. They're on the XP4 for 500 watt review as well. I think that had some missing data as well, but also got updated there. So if you're looking at either of those bikes, check the written review if you need more information and details.
It is pretty rare that we put out a review video that doesn't have the complete data. So, if you find anything missing, do check the website. And then, of course, if you have questions, let us know.
All right, but our next question comes to us on the Trek FX+1 S YouTube video from AlQN3SJ, who says, nowhere do I see a range extender available for the FX+1. At 1530 mark, you talk about an available 250 watt range extender. Are you referring to the Hyena range extender battery? If so, that battery does not work with this bike. For one, there is not available way to connect the battery to the bike, and please correct me if I am wrong, as that is what is holding me back from buying this bike. Now, John did jump in on the comments to get back on that one and said, yes, you are correct. The range extender is not compatible with the FX+1. We intended to edit that portion out of the review, but it squeezed past the editing team, so our apologies for the mistake. Response came back, no need to apologize as mistakes happen. You guys provide great content and information, which is very helpful in finding the right e-bike. Thank you. If Trek comes out with a range extender for this bike, I'll be purchasing it. Until then, I will wait for a bike which is similar in price and performance that either has a range extender or user removable battery available. So kind of like we talked about on the previous one, like, hey, sometimes some stuff happens.
For sure. Yep.
And we do our best to make up for it where we can.
That's why we have this section of the show where we can kind of get into and, dive deep on things that may not be super clear up front. But I wanted to take this opportunity to, help Al here out a little bit and really kind of get into some comparison data between a few models that are pretty similar to the FX+1 S. So before we get into that, I wanted to just state that our contact at Trek explained that the range extender there isn't compatible with that bike specifically because of how the charger connects to the bike. So that has Trek's e-MTB charger. In most cases, there's like sort of a through port that goes through the frame where you actually plug the charger directly into the battery. And in this case, it doesn't work that way. There's sort of like a connection point, like a plate on the frame that the e-MTB charger just kind of magnetically attaches to. And so you're not directly connecting to the battery, which is why a range extender does not really
kind of similar to like the mag chargers. If you got like an iPhone, the thing goes on the back of the phone.
Exactly. Yes. So there really aren't a ton of similar bikes out there with removable batteries to compare to, but there were a few things that came to mind. These are some bikes that we've talked about pretty regularly on the show because they're great bikes, and one that we mentioned earlier. So the things that came to mind were the Ride One Up Roadster version 3, the 10-Ways Seago 600 Pro or Pro C, which is the chain drive model, and then the Rad Power Bikes Rad Kick that we mentioned a little bit earlier. So the Roadster goes for about $1,400. The Seago from 10-Ways goes for about $1,600, and then the Rad Kick again goes for between $1,400 and $1,600 depending on the drivetrain setup, whereas the Trek FX+1 is about $2,000. So getting into our test data breakdown here on the speed side of things, the FX+1 S is class 2 and 3, so it pedals up to 28 miles per hour, and the throttle goes to 20. The Ride One Up Roadster V3 is the closest in that regard, so it also has a throttle and can go up to 28 miles per hour. The 10-Ways is a class 1, so it does not have a throttle, but it pedals to 20 miles per hour. And then the Rad Kick is a class 1 and 2, so that pedals and throttles to 20 miles per hour. On the range side of things, so the FX+1 S in our range test went 34 and 52 miles. The Roadster V3 went 17 and 49. The 10-Ways went 19 and 63, and the Rad Kick went 25 and 38. So there's kind of some trade-offs there. All are fairly similar. The Rad Kick was a little bit closer on its high power test. The Roadster and the Seago 600 Pro were more similar on the low power test. In hill test performance, the FX+1 S, we did not test that bike at the same location that all the others were tested at. We tested that at the new location called the Devil's Backbone. So it's kind of not a fair comparison here. Like, I'm not going to pull up data for that, but the Roadster, Seago, and Rad Kick all had pretty similar times at our new test spot. So the Roadster was 1 minute and 32, the Seago was 1 minute and 34, and the Rad Kick was also 1 minute and 34 seconds. So all of them are pretty similar, and they're all great climbers overall. They have very similar power levels, and I believe the 10-Ways is the only one with a slightly lower power motor, at least by nominal rating. That's a 350. All the others are 500, but clearly it does just as well. And then when we come into the brake test side of things, the FX+1 S stopped in 20 feet 10 inches. The Roadster was 23 feet 3 inches. The Seago 600 Pro was 23 feet 4 inches, and the Rad Kick was 21 feet 8 inches. So the Rad Kick was the closest, but all of them were very safe, very well within the normal range. So with all of that summarized, if you are looking for, one of these sort of lightweight city/urban bikes with removable batteries, the Roadster V3 is probably best if you want a throttle and similar class 3 speeds, as well as a high step frame and just the lowest price here. The 10 ways would probably be best if you want the greatest possible range. Again, that had up to 63 miles, and then high step frame, but then it also has the 2 drivetrain options. So if you value that, we would steer you there. And then the rad kick, we would say that that's best if you want the throttle, closer high power range, and another belt drive option, but you don't mind the lost my train of thought there. Don't know where that was going.
Got derailed.
I did get derailed. Don't mind the slower speeds. That's where I was going.
There you go.
Yeah, right on.
Saved
Cool.
it. Pulled it out at the last minute.
Yeah. Good stuff. It happens from time to time. But yeah, hopefully that helps you out. And if you have any further questions, you can always reach back out to us. We're happy to help. But let's see. Moving things along. This is our last question of the day. This comes to us from the Scott Silence ERide Evo Speed review that I did from NACS or NACS, who says 250 watt motor, no front or seat suspension, etc. for $3,300. How are you rating this so high? Come on, guys. It's reviews like this that make you look like shills.
Okay.
Yikes.
Hey, it's okay. We can, we can have names be thrown our way.
Right on. Yeah. Broad shoulders.
Just want to add a little bit of context and explain a little bit further in depth the Scott Silence for those who might not be familiar with that review. And then we'll just kind of circle back to the S word there that was dropped because not really. No, there's no reason to be, but I'll explain further. So starting with the 250 watt comment on the motor. So that is a pretty standard thing for mid-drive motors. In all honesty, it's probably the most common one that we come across in terms of power output. The Bosch Performance Line speed motor is excellent. It's a very dialed motor. Bosch is one of the more celebrated brands in the e-bike space for good reason. It's one of the most responsive, it's efficient, natural feeling that you're going to really find on an e-bike. It does a great job. Now, don't get us wrong, suspension is absolutely appealing, but just like everything in life, there's trade-offs, pros and cons with all systems. So while it is nice for softening up the ride, if you go without suspension, you get a more precise handling ride. So if you're the type of person doesn't mind a bump in the road, you get out of the saddle to absorb the impact, let your knees do the work, then absolutely you don't need suspension, and you might enjoy just the feel of how much faster you can corner, just the handling, and all around just feels far better, at least in my opinion.
Agreed with that for sure. Yeah.
Plus, you can always do things to change up a rigid frame. You can add on suspension seat post. You can add on even suspension stems, things like that. There are other ways to compensate for that if you need to. But again, having a fully rigid bike and fork, great crisp handling on that. Now, a few more things going into John's review here of the Scott Silence as to why it was a great bike. Number one, the geometry was terrific. And there are 4 sizing options that also includes adjustable stems. Our test bike was just really comfortable and it was just highly ergonomic. This is a not obvious by appearance signature of a well-designed bike. And
we see that with really every legacy brand, Trek, Specialized, the works. Yeah,
absolutely. Also, it has just higher end componentry in general, helping to kind of justify that price tag. It is just loaded with great parts. We're talking Magura hydraulic disc brakes, an Enviolo CVT, a Gates belt drive, Schwalbe tires, and going back to the Bosch mid-drive motor and battery. Those are all more premium than your average ride is going to be equipped with. Speaking of equipped, it's just well equipped. The Supernova M99 headlight, cafe wheel lock, cargo rack removable, color Bosch display, a chain guard, Enviolo system. We could just go on and on. It has very uncommon features that for something in the 2,500 and less. There's a reason why this bike costs what it costs. We feel that the cost was justified. And then, of course, this one does have the Bosch app. Now, apps in the e-bike world, you can kind of take them or leave them more often than not, but Bosch has put a lot of care into their app. It's actually very well done. Useful for everything from ride tracking and some accessing of other materials. It's a well executed app as well. So I understand that if someone wanted to bulk at the full price of $6,600, but right now it's actually 50% off. So it's a really, really good deal.
It's a screaming deal
on that bike right now. And just one more thing I'd just say on it is for a lot of bikes, you can get 80 to 90% the same stuff. But then when you start talking that upper tier of things, they are not vastly different like products, but it really is hard to execute that extra like 10% or whatever of like magical stuff. It's really hard to describe. We do our best as reviewers, but sometimes you just gotta like ride it to fully experience it and understand it's just very precise, very dialed in. It's one of the reasons we enjoyed that bike.
It's something that like you hop on one of those bikes and you do feel a difference right away. But that is, like you said, hard to convey sometimes.
And sometimes it's also lost on people too, right?
Sure.
Which is like, I might not know why Wagyu beef costs $80 a pound or whatever. Like the crazy thing is when I can go to In-N-Out and man, and they still make a good burger on cheap meat. But there are just certain things in life where you like, if you spend enough time with it, you can actually like appreciate those subtle differences, and you might be willing to pay a little bit more extra for them. Now coming back to the accusation of being shills, because this comes up from time to time, so it's just a good time to remind people, there's just really we don't have a dog in the fight out here. We just like riding bikes. We get access to lots of really cool products, and we love what we do for a living as a result. It's really fun to go out and do this. With virtually all brands at this point, they have affiliate programs. So we do obviously put out these detailed reviews. If you end up clicking on our links before making a purchase, it actually helps support us so we can do this for a living, like do all of this testing. But where, like I said, like 98% of brands have affiliate programs, it's hard to like be a shill because they're all
it's
doing
even, yeah. No matter what bike we're recommending.
It doesn't matter if you get the Scott bike or some other bike. It's all going to be the same like in our world, right? So
our goal is to really steer you towards what works best for you, which is why also we have this Q&A section as well.
Absolutely. And look, we do our darndest to test everything out there. We've tested literally hundreds of bikes on this channel. We're trying to cover them all and just help you understand, you know, the nature of the bike, and like John said, if it's the one for you. So hopefully that helps. And if the Scott Silence is not one for you, we understand that. But like John mentioned before, on a really good deal right now, worth taking a look at if you do want something with a little bit more premium handling and some premium features. But
that reminds me of our next section. Stick around. As I was getting at just a second ago, it's time for Deals of the Week. Deals of the Week. All right, so I guess just starting off, I will go ahead and plug the Scott Silence there again. Just at $3,300, like it's a killer bike. Take advantage of that while it is there. Go jump on it. We'll leave links down in the video description, but that's not all we have for you this week.
We've also got HeyBike's Prime Fall Sale, so they have up to $700 in savings depending on which model you are looking at. A couple that we have reviewed in the past that were pretty good. The HeyBike Alpha is currently $300 off. So it is a mid-drive fat tire e-bike. Not a whole lot of those out there. I had a really good motor experience on that one too. It was really well dialed. That one's going for just $13.99.
That's insane.
That's a very good price on a mid-drive. And like I said, mid-drive fat tire, rare combo. But also it is $500 off the Mars 2.0. So this is a powerful folding fat tire bike. Back down to its low price of just $9.99. So for $1,000 even, you can get a pretty fun and fast folding bike with 4-inch wide fat tires. A lot have shifted over to 3-inch. So if you do want a little extra stability, you can get that with the Mars 2.0.
As always, if you come across any deals that we are not aware of, that we haven't mentioned, let us know it on the comment section. But that does it for Deals of the Week.
We appreciate you guys taking the time to just listen to John and I go on and on about e-bikes, but we also like to give a little bit of space for you guys to do the same. So each week we like to highlight a writer in our audience who left us a comment. And John, who are we talking about this week?
This week we have Torv Carlson 7585, who left a comment on the Amflow versus Specialized Turbo Levo review on YouTube, or comparison rather. He said, I just got my Amflow PL Pro a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't be happier. My previous bike was a Specialized S-Works Turbo Levo Gen 3, and I was tempted by the new Gen 4 Levo, but frankly couldn't stomach Specialized's ridiculous cost. The $5,000 delta between two bikes made my decision to go for the PL Pro a no-brainer. And as the guys in the video say, that was Justin and Bryce, the Avanox motor blows away the Specialized motor, which, by the way, is software limited on Specialized's non-S-Works bikes, even though they're precisely the same motor.
All right. So, I mean, I hope you're enjoying, the new Amflow bike that is, like we've discussed, pretty amazing bike in its own right. In small defense of the Specialized, I think that's a really good bike as well. It's hard to go wrong, but I can understand, opting for the savings. It's usually how I roll too. So.
Yeah, that's all we got. But if you want to be featured in this section, you can let us know in the comment section here on any of our individual reviews or at questions@electricbikereport.com.
As always, we appreciate so much you taking your time to hang out with John and I, especially me, as I've been a little bit hoarse today going through my first...
Griffin's a little horse. Nay.
It's called a pony when it's a little horse, but going through my first cold of the season. But as always, you can check out links down below to things we talked about in the show. And if you would like, if you just love the sound of my nasally voice, you can hear it in the audio only form on Spotify, Apple, wherever it is you get your podcast. You can find us there too.
In the meantime, do all the YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, share with your buddies, leave Griffin a comment saying get better down below, and let us know if any of the topics that we talked about today stood out to you. Let us know what questions you have. We'd love to hear what bikes you ride, how you use them. You can send us photos at the email address I mentioned, but that'll do it for this week's episode of The Weekly Recharge. We'll catch you next time.